So today I'm going to be taking a look at my first Steinhart. It's almost like the watch brand that should not be named because they do a lot of homages and a lot of very blatant homages. So at the very least, this one has a little bit of a unique personality to itself. And let's take a closer look. We have a diameter of 38.9 millimeters, lug to lug of 46.8, height of 12.6, and a lug width of 20 millimeters. Some other general specifications for this watch, we're going to have the Sellita SW200 Elabor grade movement in here. Mine's currently running at about plus 4 seconds a day, so really not bad at all. It has a sapphire crystal with a double AR coating on the underside. Good thing it's not on the top side because then it could scratch away. We have 300 meters of stated water resistance with a screw down crown, BGW9 for everything that's loomed up. And other than that, it retails for $490 directly from Steinhart, or sorry, $490 from Naumann Watches is where I ordered it from. And then directly from Steinhart, it goes to about $457 converted to US dollars before shipping. So depending on where you live, shipping could be cheaper than ordering it from Naumann or more expensive. So just keep that in mind. So starting with the dial of this watch, and I think this is, I mean, obviously they didn't reinvent the wheel. It is a Submariner homage, but I do like that they went for this more interesting route. They did this pink mother of pearl dial, which I think is a really, really interesting touch, and this kind of pink ceramic bezel. So it's this thing where, yes, they didn't reinvent the wheel, but they tweaked it a little bit, so why not? Looking a little more generally, we have the classic Submariner style layout, the Mercedes style hour hand, or really hand set. The hour hand is slightly different because it kind of thins out towards the middle there. Interesting touch. Classic just layout for the rest of the markers, the squares or rectangles at 6, 9, triangle at 12, circular pips everywhere else. It is surrounded with metal indices, which is a nice touch rather than just having lume applied to the dial. No frame date window, just a regular date window, and obviously not color matched because I think a date window in mother of pearl would be a little bit hard to do, but to be fair, they could have gone for pink. Decent amount of text on the dial, somewhat like a 5-liner sub, but well, this is 4 lines. So we have Ocean 1, the name, water resistance, automatic movement, and professional. Don't really need those last 2 lines, but I guess they really want people to know it's professional. Steinhart at the top and their little bit of logo. And they do have a nice kind of color balance because everything here is in black. We have all the outer track down in black as well. And this kind of bezel, although these numerals and markers here are actually silver and they have a glint to them, they're more of a darker color. So sometimes they do look black and they do match with all the other elements. Focusing a little bit on this mother of pearl dial, I haven't really experienced many of them in person. And I will say, I think this one is really, really lovely. Kind of in very certain lightings and kind of straight on looking, it looks almost like a flat, regular pink color with a slight little mother of pearl sheen in there. But when you turn it off axis, you get the lighter pink colors in play that comes out. You get this kind of just color changing nature to it. It's a more dynamic dial, and I think that's a really, really interesting touch. Gives a little bit of uniqueness to the watch. And I think it's fun. It's a living texture. It looks nice. It's more unique. I've never seen it done before. And kudos to Steinhart for doing something different. Zooming in on the dial, and although it's stated that the lume is BGW9, I think you can tell it does have this kind of yellowish tint to it. I really don't know why that is, but does not look too great to me overall. And then the pip there itself is very, very yellow. Like you can tell right there, that looks very yellow compared to the almost now white looking lume. So really odd choice there. Don't know why that has to be yellow. It better be kind of a design constraint because otherwise it makes no sense. But going back to the dial, as you can see, the mother of pearl dial itself, really cool up front, or not up front, but up close. It does still have that kind of interesting texture, almost a cloudiness to it, a puffiness at certain angles. Where right there, it looks almost like a flat pink dial, and then you get this nice graining texture pattern to come out and play. So really cool, really well done, and I don't think it looks cheap at all. It looks really nice. The hands themselves, slightly different story, not the most perfectly done. As you can see, the kind of like triangle there at the pip has a kind of like fiber or something in it. There's a little bit of roughness along the hands themselves, but nothing too crazy. Mainly kind of like in the kind of front portion, the beginning portion of the lume there. But overall, the lume's actually packed pretty well. It's not missing any spots or looking too puffy or weird. So not too bad overall. They are polished fairly nicely, and I have seen worse hands before, so not too bad. Same story goes for the metal indices there. They do have a kind of nice puffiness, the actual metal applied indices, which I really like to see. One note I would have is I wish the actual loomed rose above the metal indice a little bit, added a little bit more depth. But honestly, I do think they get a small amount of depth in there by having the indice actually higher than the loom rather than being flush like some companies do. So kind of just a different way of accomplishing the same thing. The printing itself is really nice, really crisp, really clean. So really no complaints overall. Dial's pretty well done, not too shabby, but a little bit yellow leaning. Not the most perfectly executed, but actually for the price point, pretty fair. Looking at the case itself, and this is the biggest departure from the sub, it's not really an oyster case per se. It's a little bit flatter, it's a little bit just differently shaped. As you can see, we have vertical brushing on all the lug tops here that ties in nicely with the vertically brushed bracelet. We have a high polish on the sides, both sides, but then a nice Steinhart signed crown with their logo in there. Doesn't look too bad at all. Really kind of decent knurling to the bezel. There is a kind of good grip there. It turns very kind of sturdily. Really no backplay to kind of speak of. There is a small backplay just when you go forward and then go back into like position, but there's no further backplay beyond that. Really definite click. Decent sound to it, I think, too. 120 click bezel. So not bad at all. One thing I forgot to mention that you can see there, the bezel slightly protrudes the case, so you're able to grip it slightly better. Nice little touch there, design that really didn't have to be taken, but glad they actually did it. Pretty decent knurling to the crown, easy to unscrew, very defined click when it actually does pop out. Pretty grainy, rough winding position. That's just kind of how this movement is at this price point. Nothing too out of the ordinary, sets well, feels decent, able to screw in pretty nicely. So really no complaints. Looking at the mid case, I do really like what Steinhart did here. It's a fairly thin mid case. The bezel takes up most of the height along with the case back, so it does sit on the wrist very well, and it being 39 millimeters already, it does wear really nicely on wrist. And thankfully they also did go with female end links, so it has the ability to conform really well. And then looking at the bracelet really quick, kind of classic 3-link oyster style bracelet, thinner on the sides, thicker in the mid link. Nothing too crazy, nothing to write home about. We do have screwed links though, which is really nice to see, and 4 holes of micro adjustment. Clasp could use a slight bit of improvement because it's just a friction fit here. I would like to see a push button deployant, but overall, decently feeling. Not the worst action and not the hardest to unlock, so at least some points there. And looking at the case back there, we can see a little bit of a homage to Greek culture, I guess. They might be Poseidon, might just be a Trojan warrior. I don't know, but looks cool. Probably has some mythological aspect to it. So not too bad, and it really isn't executed that badly either. So moving on to how this watch wears. Earlier I was wearing my Doxa Sub 200. And then here we have it on my 6.5 inch wrist. As you can tell, sits within the kind of the bounds of my wrist pretty nicely. Doesn't overhang at all. Sits pretty cleanly and really low to the wrist. Really no harsh corners or anything. The crown does dig a little bit. Maybe some refinement could be done there. But overall, very comfortable wear. The kind of biggest gripe I have with this watch is for some reason I just don't think the bracelet works with this design. There is almost maybe an elegance about the watch, and the bracelet's almost too tooly. They do offer it on a kind of like beads of rice, or I think they offer it on a Jubilee. That's right. So it's a Jubilee. I think the Jubilee probably fits better. It's a little bit dressier. It's a little bit maybe more elegant. And maybe it doesn't have as much taper as this bracelet does, which for some reason I think doesn't go with the watch. But that's just my opinion. Maybe you love the look, and that's fine. Just something about it doesn't sit right to me. And there we have it from the side view. As you can see again, case back sits pretty nicely into the wrist, so any flexion sits really close. Pretty comfortable wearing watch, and again you can see that kind of pink mother of pearl playing with the light. So the first combo we're gonna have here is the cork strap by Theo and Harris and John Rousseau. It's not the most perfect combination, to be honest, but I do like it because the brown tones I think work well with the pink, and then the kind of blackish, darkish brown elements of the cork match well with the black text. So it is a cool combo, and it has like a red lining which matches with the pink, so hey. There we have it on wrist. Interesting little look there. So yeah, that's the cork. Next we have this pink silicone strap. I think it pairs perfectly, looks awesome, takes the pink to level 20, so looks cool, is really fun, and let's get it on wrist. Wears very comfortably, and again, because it is a 39mm diver and actually slightly smaller than that just because the bezel overhangs, it's a very comfortable wearing watch. And lastly, we have my Archer silicone strap, which I think doesn't really pair as perfectly as I want it to. If I kind of get you a little closer, you can see the white tones of the Lume doesn't match quite as much with the white tones of the strap, and definitely doesn't match with this weird yellow tone of the kind of triangular pip. So weird, but it kind of works while not working. There we have it on wrist. Not too bad of a combo, super comfortable, and again, watch wears pretty well. Taking a look at the Lume here, again, you have that classic BGW9 glow to it, that bluish green tint. It's applied pretty well. I would say the hands, at least in person, are slightly brighter than the markers themselves, and the hands actually kind of match the Lume pip. Again, are the 12 o'clock triangle Lume pip in the bezel. Again, why does it yellow instead of whitish, or at least greenish whitish like the other hands and markers? I don't know, but Lume's decently applied, doesn't last forever, but while it does last, does glow nicely and is very readable, especially with that kind of pip on the second hand there. Reluming and a quick comparison to the Timex, I don't think the color temperatures are all that different, and the brightness honestly isn't that different either, especially in person. So again, not a bad application of Lume, but don't expect it to knock your socks off.
So pros and cons of this watch, and I'm gonna say an undoubted pro for it is the dial. It is unique, it's cool that it's mother of pearl, it's awesome that it's pink, it's fun, it's fresh, it's just cool. And I think it's nice because it also gives it a little bit of a life of its own. It is not a one-to-one Submariner homage. There is no mother of pearl pink Submariner dial. And although they're taking a lot of the classic design elements of what would be a Submariner, it again is taking that and adding a twist. And I think that it's very beneficial for this watch line, and considering the price it comes at, it's a cool little fun watch. Another pro I would say is the size of the watch. You're talking about a under 40mm dive watch, and that's not a super popular category, especially under $1,000. So overall, it's just nice to see when most brands keep sizing up for whatever reason, there are still some smaller options for those of us that like smaller watches. And last but not least, I think this is a good quality for the price you pay. It is around $450 to $500, depending on like the shipping costs and whatnot, and what the conversion rate is. But for that price, it's a lot of watch. You're getting a ceramic bezel. You're getting pretty decent Lume. You're getting a mother of pearl dial. The watch is built fairly well. All the construction, down to the bracelet, down to the case, all feels very good. So it's just one of those things where, are you okay with it being an homage? And if you are you okay with it not being perfect? Because although, again, it is taking inspiration from the Submariner, it is by no means a one-to-one copy, and it also ends up lacking in its presentation because of that. So with that note, let's kind of move on to cons. And again, although it copies the Submariner, it doesn't copy it one-to-one. And the case ends up feeling a little lackluster. It doesn't, I think, quite mesh with the bracelet at the very least. On its own, when it's on a strap, it looks a little bit better, but I think with the oyster style bracelet, especially because the first kind of link flares up and almost points up at the sky, at least on my wrist it does, it just doesn't look right. And the oyster bracelet I don't think is super congruent with the case shape. I think this watch would look a lot better on a Jubilee bracelet or a Beads of Rice bracelet or something of the such, and you can get it on a Jubilee, but at least the variation I got, or standard at least, comes on a oyster, and I don't think it pairs perfectly. Another con I have is the Lume. I mean, it is well applied, it shines brightly, it is BGW9, which is nice to see, but it still does lean yellowish, especially in the bezel, the kind of 12 o'clock Lume pip, which is very, very yellow. I was close to keeping this watch because I liked how unique it was, I liked how fun the dial was, but the fact that the Lume pip was just so weirdly yellow just threw off the tones of the watch. If that's a weird mishap with just manufacturing and that's just how it will come out every time, just don't Lume that portion or make it a steel bezel. But to me, it ruins the design so much so that it almost becomes a watch that I can't recommend. So pros and cons to this watch, and it is a fun one, especially if you go for one of these mother of pearl variations where you get a really cool dial for around $500. It doesn't necessarily break the bank, and you're getting a lot of kind of uniqueness out of the watch. Again, it doesn't look like every other clone out there. It's definitely better than like an Invicta. It's maybe just a style you like. You like dive watches and you like the Submariner look, but you maybe don't want to go all the way and wear like a fake one or one that looks too close to the original. So this is a kind of nice halfway point where you get most of the look, but you get a little bit of its own flair to it. Is it a perfect watch? No. Is it well made and well built and kind of justifies the price point that it's at? I would say so. So at the end of the day, it just becomes, what do you want out of the watch? Do you want fresh original design, or do you just want something that's fun to beat around, something you can wear and not really care about? Or if you already have a Submariner, you just want a little fun watch to wear when you're traveling in less than savory places, this is a good option. After actually handling a Steinhart in person, I would definitely recommend them to anyone who's looking at one. As long as you like the look, you like the design, you're not wasting your money. It is well built and it's worthy of the cost. But just be aware, it's not going to be perfect. There are going to be slight QC issues, possibly. There's also going to be things like, let's say, the Lume for me, that might bother you. Those are just my thoughts. Thank you for watching as always. Hope you got something out of the video, and I'll see you in another one.